So I want to talk a little bit more about gear that will be of particular interest to the Paladin. Hello everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. And normally I'd be talking about the generalized overall strategy and tactics of this particular Paladin build, but I wasn't entirely satisfied with the equipment list that I had discussed last time. Not that any part of it was necessarily wrong or badly done, it's just I've covered many of these pieces of equipment several times, and I continue to do so and will probably continue to do so for all of the classes because these are just outright fundamentally incredibly useful items for just about every class, or at least pretty close to it. There's some things that are just going to mechanically make the most sense, and it's going to be useful for new players to know. And there's still people that come around and try this this different RPG out, and yeah, so it would be remiss of me not to cover them. But, as I'm sure many of you viewers realize, going over these same items does get a little bit old, so we're going to add in some that don't really come up a lot, or are some things that are specifically useful for the Paladin. Now, that's not to say that these won't be useful for other classes, but I want to talk about some new items. But before we get into all of that, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit the subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamer's Den. Or, if you've already gone on ahead and listed yourself on such an incredible roster of legendary heroes, you dashingly awesome folks you, then go on down to hit the like button and share the video far and wide. But now, let's start talking about some of this gear, and the first item up on the docket today are Pearls of Power. These come in at anywhere from 1,000 to 16,000 gold pieces for our interests, or a 70,000 gold piece version. These typically allow you to recall one prepared spell to use again from first to fourth level. Now, there are more that go all the way up to 9th level, but we're not interested in those because we stop at 4th level for our spell casting. However, there are some versions that will allow for 2 spells of different levels to be recalled. Those ones top out at 6th level spells, but again, we're only worried about the ones that will let you restore a 4th level spell and other levels of spells as well. These will be handy because they add a lot of staying power for your spell casting. This will allow you to utilize more of your buffs or whatever debuffs you may have available to you for yourself and for your allies at large. So these are incredibly valuable for you, especially since you are more limited in your spell casting. The next item's an interesting one, and there's a little bit of a caveat with it that needs to be discussed, and that's the Circlet of Persuasion. This one costs a comparatively humble 4,500 gold pieces. This gives a +3 competence bonus to charisma-based checks, and can be worn with the Headband of Charisma because this occupies the head slot, whereas the headband specifically occupies the headband slot, so they can be worn together, and those bonuses will stack because it's a +3 competence bonus to charisma-based checks, whereas the Headband of Charisma is a enhancement bonus to the charisma stat itself. So those will stack together with your existing charisma bonus. The tricky part with this comes in with the first level feat, Scion of War, which we specifically selected the option that allows you to use your charisma modifier instead of your dexterity modifier for initiative. Now, I've tried looking into this. There's a lot of debate and arguing back and forth surrounding it, and I didn't really find any FAQs that clarified. But the concern is, the heart of the issue is, does that make initiative then a charisma-based check? I would say yes, but I can also understand why DMs wouldn't allow this to go through, because say we take the Ifrit as the race that we select for our Paladin. Now, we take the wildfire heart trait, which gives a +4 racial bonus to initiative. We have a charisma score of 16, so that's a +3 bonus right there. Then we pick up a circlet of persuasion, which it would not be a super hard item to come across. That's a +10 bonus right there before we apply anything like the improved initiative feat, which takes us up to a +14, meaning we are pretty reliably going to, if not going at the top of the initiative order, we're not going to be at the bottom either. We're never going to be at the bottom of the initiative order. I mean, if you have a decent charisma modifier, which the Afridi race does provide, you're looking at a +1, +2 right there. So, 15 to 16 for your initiative score. That's ridiculous how well this stacks, and then top it off with the fact that we are using Intimidate as part of our combat build to inflict different status effects on opponents as we attack and down different enemies. And all the way around, this makes a circlet of persuasion incredibly valuable if your DM allows you to count this +3 competence bonus to your initiative, because then they believe initiative is a charisma-based check. I would say technically yes it is, but I don't know that I would necessarily let this go through. I appreciate when players find and notice clever little things, but this is a bit on the power gaming side of things for my liking. I don't really like that too much. Don't like it when players use those kinds of little technicalities. So, warning for DMs out there, warnings for new players out there that are looking at this and going, ooh, opportunity. Don't really see any FAQs, and there is strong reason to look at this and look at that whole situation and go, well, it's still a dex-based check, or it's still an initiative check. They can make a case for not allowing the +3 competence bonus to go through because at its heart, it's not originally a dex. You can see how this argument gets pretty cyclical pretty fast. But the next item is much simpler and easier to talk about, and it's an iconic classic. It's the Holy Avenger. Now, this is not something you buy. This is something you find as loot. It's a quest reward. It's something you find in the dire moments. It's a 120,630 gold piece +2 cold iron longsword that, in a paladin's hands, functions as a +5 holy cold iron longsword. This will also give a spell resistance 5 plus your paladin class levels to the paladin and anyone immediately adjacent to them, as well as allowing you to do an area effect portion of greater dispel magic once per round as a standard action. Now, this is actually still a pretty solid item. It's +5 holy and cold iron. That's right up your alley. That's exactly what you want. Cold iron, there's plenty of enemies whose damage reduction specifically requires cold iron, and enemies who require a holy or good aligned weapon to overcome their damage reductions. And then those fiends that are some of the higher tier creatures like pit fiends from the 9 hells. Those require good aligned and cold iron weapons in order to overcome their damage reduction. So this item absolutely works for paladins, works for a lot of the different kinds of opponents who are expected to, thematically, lore-wise, are expected to fight. But that spell resistance, while it's nice to have, isn't great. These kinds of opponents have the spell casting ability necessary to reliably go over that. Even if you're level 18, spell resistance 5 plus your paladin level is still only a 23. And things like pit fiends, or hell, even just a dedicated full-class spellcaster that's been built even halfway right, is going to have a significant bonus to their caster level checks to overcome spell resistance, unless they roll badly, in which case, fantastic, great, glad you had the spell resistance. It's a nice little barrier for them to trip over, but they're tripping over a sidewalk. They're not trying to scale a fence to get at you. So, not the best, but still nice to have. It's nice that it's there. And the same thing with greater dispel magic. It's nice that it's the area of, it's nice to have it there. It's great that it's an area of effect, but that limits it. You're not able to specifically target an opponent, and obviously you can't use it to counterspell or anything like that. So that's severely limiting despite the iconic status the weapon it has. It's nice that those options are there, and it's nice that it's coupled on with a really good weapon, but this is also limiting in that a longsword, while I am a fan of that iconic look, I love longswords, mechanically you are going with a lower damage output. Even though you can two-hand it and you can still power attack with it and get that extra bonus damage for two-handing a weapon, it still is going to limit you somewhat. But that said, if you get this, it's still a good item. I would just talk with your DM and see if they'd be willing to ease a couple of things there. Maybe make that spell resistance 10 plus your class levels. That would definitely be a good step up. And allow the greater dispel magic to function with the being able to hit the specific target. Make it so that it has to be the target you're attacking. You can't just go and target somebody else, but the person you're attacking, that wizard, that pit fiend, who is assuredly going to have their own magics buffing and empowering themselves. Removing those would be a fantastic. Removing those specifically off of that one target would be great. That would make this a much more useful item. As it is, it's a pretty good one, but maybe a bit overrated and overblown just because of the history it has and the iconic status. I might even still be rating this a little bit too high as it is. But we still have a couple more items to go over. The next one is one that I am definitely probably overrating a little bit, but something about it just makes me like it. That's the Scabbard of Keen Edges. It costs 16,000 gold pieces, and it's a scabbard that will adjust to fit anything from a knife to a greatsword. And 3 times a day, this can cast Keen Edge on any blade placed in it. Now, the fact that it essentially gives you the keen effect on an item is great, especially since we're not going into a build that utilizes feats to help expand our critical hit range with any version of a specific weapon that we pick up. That would be nice to have, and this is a great effect to have. The thing is that the keen enchantment is only a +1 enhancement modifier, roughly about 2,000 gold pieces. So it's comparatively cheap to throw onto a mastercraft item, a masterwork item, in comparison to spending 16,000 to apply this to a weapon 3 times a day for, a limited duration. Now, the fact that you can just continuously do this over several days and can do this with whatever item you store in it, and that this will adjust to fit the item, that is great. That is useful. I mean, it's great to be able to know that, hey, I found this random falchion. It's +1 falchion, but it doesn't have the keen effect. It would be great if I could just have this as a backup, and now then I can have an item with an expanded critical hit range. That increases the value of that random item you found massively, especially if you do need a backup. But that's what this would be used for, is for your backup weapons, and sinking in 16,000 gold pieces for backup weapons. From a mechanical standpoint, from just pure, effectiveness, efficiency, it's not great, but something at the back of my mind just really likes this. But the next item is worth its weight in gold, and that's absolutely fantastic because it's expensive. The Strand of Prayer Beads, 45,800 gold pieces for the standard version, which you want. These simple-looking beads have 2 amongst their number with magic properties. The Bead of Karma adds +4 to your caster level. The Bead of Healing and the Beads of Smiting are options that are up to you and to the DM, especially if they're randomly generating the treasure. Definitely see if your DM is willing to let you have the version that has a Bead of Karma on it, because remember, your spell casting is your level -4. This makes up that difference and will allow all of your different buffs and the occasional debuffs that you throw out there be more effective. They'll last longer, they'll be harder to resist. this is absolutely worth its weight in gold for you. And the fact that you can have these other effects is just icing on the cake overall. Bead of Healing, while the Cure Serious, Cure Moderate Wounds spell that's on it isn't the most efficient thing, it does have a couple of other spells that remove status effects. And Bead of Smiting, well, it has options that do exactly what it says. It helps make life miserable for your opponents, specifically evil opponents at that. Unless you're going to go with an evil version of this because you went Blackguard, you tyrannical figure, you. But still, the Bead of Karma alone is actually incredibly useful for you. Definitely massively valuable. And if you ended up taking the Magical Knack trait to help boost your caster level, and then you get this item on top of it as well, well, fantastic. Now your spells are even better. Definitely worthwhile to have and is worth looking at. And this is by no means the only selections of items out there. There are the Bracers of the Merciful Knight, if I'm remembering right, that allows you to basically treat your Lay on Hands ability as if you were 4 levels higher. That's another 2d6 points of healing and another 2 uses of Lay on Hands, which is pretty useful, especially when you factor in that you have all of your mercies that apply on that as well. So that's really great. There are so many items out there to take a look at, and I just encourage you to do so, and definitely keep an open mind as well too with some different items, because you never know when just a little bit of clever thinking, planning, or gameplay will make a seemingly innocuous magic item incredibly effective for you. But what do you think? Go on down to the comments below and let me know your thoughts. Did you like today's video? Did you dislike it? Hit those like or dislike buttons and let me know in the comments down below so that we can engage in discussion. And remember, if you're new here to the channel, go on down there, hit that subscribe button, and become a regular member here at the Gamers Den. But with all of that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Thank you all so very much for your time, and you all have yourselves a good night.